The trial within a trial in the Senzo Meyiwa murder case continues in the Pretoria High Court this morning. On Monday, the court was expected to hear closing arguments in the matter, but the trial hit another hurdle after accused number one, Muzi Sibiya, dismissed his instructing attorney, Sipho Ramosepele, forcing a postponement. Sibiya also asked the court to reopen his case and then to allow him to call his own witnesses. The witnesses are former Gauteng Hawks boss Shadrack Sibiya, Warrant Officer Meshack Makhubo and Colonel Vincent Leshabane. Sibiya and accused number two, Bongani Ntanzi, are disputing their alleged confessions, saying they were tortured into signing them while Meyiwa was killed in Vosloorus in October 2014. And our very own Mnisi joins us now to talk more about this. It was an unexpected delay the other day. Even the magistrate seemed to be, even the judge seemed to be, perplexed that this was another hurdle. We want to get on. The family wants to get on. The nation wants to get on with the actual trial. But these are very important hurdles legally that have to be overcome.
Yes, importantly because what Thulani Mngomezulu, who now represents accused number one, said was that the reason why, there had to be those changes was because legal aid had instructed them on Friday last week that they would not be paying him for the services that he'd rendered throughout the trial within a trial. You'll remember he joined this case during the trial within a trial, and they said, well, we're not going to be paying you for the services rendered. And that comes from the agreement that was reached at the beginning of this new trial, that legal aid would be footing the bill for the defense, given that the trial had to start all over again. So him coming into the picture, I suppose, was not organized, was not planned, and there was no agreement between him and legal aid. And because of that, he then said, well, there are issues, and accused number one was quite comfortable with instructing him privately. But if you look at, the snag and this delay, one might say it's also a good thing because it speaks to the delays, right? And if somebody instructs their lawyer privately, then it would obviously affect their pocket when there are unnecessary delays, when there are numerous postponements and the case does not go ahead. So on the other hand, it is good because then the case will start moving. Because
it's in their interest to make it move as quickly as possible so as not to incur those extra expenses. Yeah. All right, so just locate us architecturally in terms of this whole story. We're coming up to the 10th anniversary of this event, which has impaled the nation, the nation's interests. What happens today? What's expected, at least, to happen today?
Yeah. You remember on Monday, the postponement was also for the defense, in particular, Thulani Mngomezulu, who's representing accused number one, to also finish off with consultations with the potential witnesses that they want to call. They've made an application to reopen their case, and they want to call those 3 police officers that they've mentioned. The state initially objected, saying they don't see or know the relevance of calling these witnesses because they were not even mentioned in the trial within the trial. They were not involved in the obtaining of these confession statements. Interesting that even the defense, the other defense attorneys like Advocate Ngumal, who represents accused number 4, and Advocate Mshololo, who represents accused number 5, told the court that, in fact, the initial agreement was that these police officers would be called in the main trial. So they don't know what changed because they had discussed as a unit, as the defense, that these would be important witnesses in the main trial. But it is accused number one's right to call whoever he wants to call in his case. So the judge saying, because I've given you a postponement to deal with issues of calling witnesses, previously I gave you 3 days, including a weekend, to sort out your issues with calling witnesses. You came on the Monday and you said, well, we're closing our case. Now you're coming back and you're saying, well, we want to call new witnesses. The court will bend backwards to accommodate you because I don't want to be accused of running an unfair trial.
Yeah, Judge Rata Mokwatleng not holding back on his frustrations the other day, in a sense, at this new development. But then what does it mean for the timeline? If, as you say, there was a pre-agreement on the orchestration of witnesses that would appear later and not necessarily in this portion, which is really to test the veracity of those confessions, which will become a germane piece of evidence in the main trial, he's kind of breaking ranks with them now and introducing a whole new challenge. The big question is, what is going to be the impact? I mean, we can't speculate on the likelihood of it being allowed, but what will it impact in terms of time?
Well, obviously, those are 3 witnesses who would have to be led in the stand. The state will still have to cross-examine them, and depending on the kind of evidence that they'll be deposing, obviously that will determine the duration in which each witness spends on the stand. So you can say it'll take a bit of time because we don't know what kind of evidence that they're going to be presenting in court in this trial within a trial. But, calling them in this trial within a trial also does not stop the defense from calling them in the main trial, because the evidence that is heard in the main trial does not necessarily have an impact on what is heard in the trial within a trial, because this trial within a trial is sort of like a separate inquiry looking into the admissibility of these confession statements. So they can still call them again in the main trial.
Well, it's going to be a very interesting, an interesting courtroom to look at this morning. So we are in the North Gauteng High Court this morning. Just give us a sense of, again, how that's likely to unfold.
Okay, so today, obviously, everybody's going to be in court. The accused persons are expected to be in court. And one of the things that the judge will want to know are the outcomes of those consultations. But also, Iman, the issue around heads of arguments. You remember the matter was set down for heads of arguments on Monday, and those had to stall due to these new developments. So Thulani Mngomezulu also saying, well, I was not ready, I was not done with writing the heads of arguments because of the developments. You'll remember that they were given 2 weeks to put together their heads of arguments and file them on that particular Friday. It's also quite interesting that he says he was not done with writing those heads of arguments, and he only learns of the developments on the Friday. And the Friday was the date of the deadline, Iman. So that does not really look good on his part, because they were given 2 weeks. The state was given a week, so they had to wait for the state to file their heads first, get the state's heads, and then file theirs a week later. So they would have had 2 weeks to look into the evidence that was presented in court, look at their evidence, and then file heads in, of course, also taking into account the state's heads and what the state had to say about the case that has been laid. So it really does not look good in that sense, because you've had time to file those heads. So now what we're expecting is that the judge, obviously, in the interest of time and of justice, the judge will want to have this case move forward.
It is going to be another interesting thing to watch and see how those developments go. I don't see the appetite for another postponement should the need arise.